Hello and welcome to the Rubber Duck Dev Show. I'm Chris.
I'm Creston.
And tonight we're going to go through a nice chat about the 12 principles behind the Agile Manifesto. So this isn't the Agile Manifesto itself. That's pretty short, but the 12 principles behind it. But before we do that, how was your week?
So pretty busy. I've always been busy. I don't know what's going on. I'm like perpetually behind. I have too much work I need to get done. Not enough time. Um, but I I did run into two things that I thought I would share to focus on. One is I have chosen to use AWS. So my infrastructure runs on AWS. And I decided to use CloudFront for doing log aggregation. It also tracks some metrics and stuff. I'm not 100% happy with it. I probably want to use a different tool, particularly for metrics. But with regard to log aggregation, I ran into just an extraordinarily frustrating phenomenon. Now, what do you guys or what have you used for log aggregation?
We have currently used Datadog. Have used, I just went like full in old man mind. Crap. Anyway.
I've never heard of crap.
Yeah, well, it
Is that
is.
with an exclamation point?
Kind of, yeah.
Well, I was trying to answer a question from 4 months ago, and I had
Grafana.
enough.
Sorry.
That they don't do log aggregation.
Oh, want to bet? They don't do it well, but they do it.
Well,
I'm
it
just
sounds
saying.
like you're using hammers for saw work, frankly. But anyway,
Which is why we don't use it anymore. But yeah.
so I was trying to answer a question from 4 months ago, like, what caused this particular thing to get deleted? And I knew exactly what I would look for. And then I tried to search for it, and that thing just spun forever. The AWS CloudFront doing a search.
Hmm.
And hours and hours later, I just kicked it to the curb because it was just ridiculous. Then I went onto the server itself, and I would have to do multiple servers because there are multiple application servers. And that happened to be just the one that I don't have that many, but I happened to choose the right one. Just took all the zip files because I still have 4 months worth of zip files on the itself because my log rotate zips them up. I transferred all of them to the temp disk, unzipped them, and then I used a simple grep command. And all of that took like somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. And I'm like, I can't, why can I try to just get the simple query to answer a question in CloudFront, and it takes, in the actual runtime, this is 5 to 10 minutes of me doing stuff to actually get it, but the actual runtime of finding it was on the order of seconds to find the answer to my question. So I'm like, yeah, I'm frustrated, and I'm going to be looking for something else. So that's one area. The second area is that I have, because I deal with a lot of large infrastructures, I kind of built in a lot of, well, people talk about gold plating their code. Well, I gold plated my infrastructure to a certain extent in terms of having multiple redundant paths to different things, just to just to educate myself into consume your own dog fooding, your own
Right.
dog food type thing. And I said, but I think I could probably reduce costs. And then I was dealing with this nagging problem of poor response times sometimes, meaning if I clicked refresh just to pull up go through a Rails action and render a page, like 8 out of 10 times it's fast, and then 2 out of 10 times it spins a little bit before it would render. I'm like, well, what the heck is this? because I don't see anything like that in development, of course. So I simplified well, not everything, but I simplified stuff, but I still have redundancy. So I still have multiple application servers and traffic gets redirected between both. But I have been able to reduce some network round trips, as well as part of this plan was to avoid using T3 instances. So if people who don't use Amazon, T3s are basically burstable instances. So I don't know if it's potentially that your neighbors are more noisy or the performance, maybe there's a little bit of a latency to it or what it is. But I decided to go with either their M, their R, or their C series, which are supposed to be more consistent performance. So I switched. The database was already out on one of those, but I switched the application servers to be on those. So I got essentially a little bit larger application servers and consolidated other services on them to justify the cost differential. All that to say, if the cost projections are correct, I have now halved my infrastructure costs. And according to Skylight, I have improved performance by at least 25% and potentially more.
Wow.
So I don't know. I mean, I think some of the network round tripping, maybe some of it, like because I was spread across different availability zones. I still am doing that to a certain extent, but not as much before. But I mean, my memcached is still across different availability zones. Um, but I'm thinking right now. I changed a fair amount of the infrastructure. But I think maybe the biggest win was going from a T3 instance to one of their more consistent performance ones, like either their M, their R, or their C instances. So that was a pretty big win because I'm saving money. And then secondly, better performance. So I'm like, okay, win-win.
Less cost, better performance. Gosh, let me think about that for a hot second. Yeah, so well, I mean, on the not work front, half an hour before the show, I was taking a door off its hinges because the 10-minute job to move a piece of equipment down the hall turned into a 1 hour impossible job. I had to take my house apart. So that was all kinds of fun right before the show.
You know what I would have said? I said, yeah, I can't do it.
Well, the problem was we got it halfway done and it was blocking the door. And so then it was like,
Oh
well,
my gosh.
I'm stuck in my room. So either I take the door off or I don't do the show.
Or no show. Okay.
So down comes the door. Anyway, on the work front, I actually had kind of a weird thing that as long as I've been doing testing, as much testing as I've done, I've never run into this before. We had, we did the Ruby 3.1 upgrade, and the part of the Ruby 3 upgrade was the double splat stuff for the parameterized, or the parameter, the named argument stuff, the parameter stuff, right? So we did all that. We released it to dev, and of course, somebody out there found an edge case. Things stopped working. So for that customer, so we rolled back, and I took a look at it, and it turns out that had a test that exercised that code. It went through that code path, but it didn't fail on that particular problem because that particular call that was making was mocked in the tests. So it while it went through the right code path, because that was mocked, it didn't pick up on the fact that, hey, this needs to be double splatted, so it didn't fail. So that was a nice little bite you in the butt thing. So word of warning, be very careful, especially when if you're upgrading to Ruby 3 and doing all this double splat stuff. Check everywhere that you're doing mocks and stubs in your tests and make sure that those calls are actually exercising the code you think it's exercising, so you don't miss that, because that was a was a tough nut to crack. It's hard to find. 8 million lines of test code. A little hyperbolic there, but it's a lot. So anyway, that was the fun of the week. Woohoo!
The drudge of the week, more
Yeah.
like it's
Is it Friday yet? All right, so let's get into the meat of this week. Let us take a look at 12 principles of Agile. Hoping chat shows up tonight, but if they don't, we'll just go anyway. All right, so again, this isn't the actual Agile Manifesto. I've got that at the end. I'll show you that, but that's not what we're talking about tonight, not the actual manifesto. We're talking about the 12 principles that they used to come up with the Agile Manifesto. And I was kind of curious how many practitioners of Agile have actually looked at this stuff to find out where this came from. My guess would be not a lot. But we'll see. Tell me, chat, have you ever seen this stuff before? So principle number 1, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Sounds like a no-brainer if you're a business, but I see a lot of times that people kind of lose focus of this. They're so, especially programmers, get so focused on, oh, I got to fix this bug. Oh, I've got this cool idea for a new feature. Oh, I've got this thing. Oh, I've got to do this thing. And they forget about the whole point of doing this is to deliver something to a customer. So
yeah, as I was reading through all of these, I think it is beneficial or instructional to remember when this was codified, what software development was like at the time. And you and I can, because we're old fogies, not the oldest fogies, but we're old fogies. And essentially, when this came out, the waterfall method of software development was in a high amount of use, where it was more top-down control and writing down the requirements and following the specifications, and things would be structured, and then you couldn't change them forever.
right.
So I think having that perspective that that's kind of how software development was done, and this was a counter to that method.
Yeah.
So I found this instruction. I was looking through these as they're phrasing it this way because at the time,
Mm-hmm.
The waterfall method was the one used in prevalence.
Yeah, and kind of what happened for those of you who are younger and kind of newer to the game and weren't around in the 80s and 90s when this stuff was going on a lot. They looked at software as a production function. And so they took management lessons from other production functions, like producing houses in construction or producing widgets in the factory. And that stuff is a lot easier to put in a waterfall or a Gantt chart because it all kind of flows. I have to lay the foundation first. Then we have to get the 2x4s to build the frames. Then we have, there's a sequence that must happen. And what they started realizing, the people that started working on this stuff, was programming is much more fluid than that. And it can't, every time you try to create a schedule that way with programming, it falls apart before you get halfway through it. And you spend inordinate amounts of time planning and writing up documentation and stuff, and that all goes out the window 2 or 3 weeks into the project, and then you've just wasted all that time. So why do that? Let's just plan a week or two ahead, and not try to get everything flowing up front.
Well, I think that stuff happens with all those other processes you mentioned, building a house, but I'm sure that all the plans come together, all the documentation, and then they build it and they're like, this isn't what we want. I'm sure that happens everywhere else. But the advantage that software has, which the principles talk about, which I find interesting, is that software can be different, meaning that you can build the smallest functional thing and just have it work and show it to someone. Whereas when you say, hey, I built the room of the house, isn't it great? Do you want to live in this room? And then I'll build on the rest. It's not really done that way.
Right. Here,
Or
I
it's
built
harder
I
to do
built a
that way versus
chimney.
software.
Huzzah!
Yeah.
We can
Is
stop
this
now,
the
right?
chimney? Is this the chimney that you want? Do you want it to be bigger or smaller? I can't.
I
Yeah,
don't know. What does the room look like around it?
exactly. So I think software is a little bit more malleable to be able to follow this type of technique.
Right, exactly. And the other thing too is that, as you said, the decomposable parts of software can actually have business value, whereas the decomposable parts of lot of other production processes really don't. Um, hey, Colin, welcome to the show, man.
Howdy.
Daughter's dance class, huh? Fun. Showing them how it's done. Um, so yeah, I think because, and I've always looked at programming as just as much art as science. So I think that I think that there has to be a lot more malleability there, and it just has to flow differently. Because I remember working on waterfalls and all, getting everything prepped ahead of time and all the paperwork and stuff, and if somebody programmed something, you'd go back and check it against the original spec and make sure that and I'm not against specking things out. You have to understand where your finish line is, but you know deciding where every piece of gravel goes on the gravel road is just not a good way to program. It's ahead of time anyway. But anyway, this got to deliver stuff to satisfy customers. That's the point. Number 2, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Again, this is a customer-focused principle. And don't fight against your customers. If they come up with a good idea, say, cool, let's try to work that in. It's your customers are the ones that are using this stuff. So, don't poo-poo their ideas. They know their market.
Yeah. And that also means that even if you had grand plans to build the Taj Mahal, they may say, oh no, we need to take it in a different direction and go this way. Then you have to accept that and, follow their lead.
Right. And even if you're developing stuff for end users, it's not a B2B thing you're doing. You're doing a developing for end users and selling directly. It's still their problem that you're trying to solve. And if they tell you what their problem is and it's not what you had anticipated, you need to be able to move to what their problem is or find a different audience, one of the two. But it's all about the customer. And number 3, deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale. So this is, you kind of touched on this earlier, is small deliverable things that have value by themselves. And that was a radical shift to one of the big radical shifts in this paradigm against the kind of waterfall model, because when we used to program like that, it was we couldn't sell anything until the whole thing was done. We didn't have anything really usable until the whole thing was done, or at least we may have had something usable, but nobody was looking at that going, hey, I could sell this bit. Now let's start with this. Nobody was looking at it that way. They just waited till it was all done. So you would have 1 or 2 year huge programming projects that were nothing but money sinks. So
Money pit.
yeah. So this was a huge shift in kind of how management started looking at programming projects and saying, hey, we can monetize things along the way, which
And the
is
advantage and the key advantage of deliver something frequently is that you get quick feedback. So you know immediately, oh, don't go down this way, as opposed to you're laying the foundation and you suddenly discover you're 8 feet too short on one end, or, whatever
right.
analogy you want to use.
Yeah, and it also makes your customers happier because they're not sitting there wondering for 6 months, hey, what's going to happen here? They're like every week or two, they're seeing progress, saying, well, this isn't 100% of where I want to go, but there's some progress, so I'm happy. So that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, and of the two of us, he's the slow talker, so look out, because if I get going. Number 4, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. This is one that I still have a lot of problems implementing. This is really hard. One of the biggest hurdles is just the kind of the language barrier. Most people on the business side don't understand programmerese, and we're typically not very good at translating to English. So you kind of get this mismatch of language, and it's just really hard to do this. It's important, but it's really hard, and it's something that I still struggle with.
So for me, I don't really have a difficulty with the communication or speaking that way. I mean, maybe it's because, I own a business, so
Yeah.
I understand the dollars and the cents. Also, a lot of my background, I wasn't all just computers and stuff. I mean, I was, leading a team of people. But I think with regard to this principle, the hardest one is actually getting I'm sure in the environment, there's developers that don't want that interface. So they need to be told, hey, you got to work together daily on the project. I think that's one problem. But another problem is the focus of business people. So I think it can be quite hard to get the focus of the business people to say, hey, pay attention to this project. Is it delivering what you, because they are so busy, hair on fire, running around doing all the things they need to do, and then having to dedicate their time to keep things on track is hard.
I've actually been unblocked by a non-technical business person before, which was surprisingly nice. Really, Colin? That is surprising. I mean, it happens, but yeah, that is surprisingly nice. It doesn't happen that often. And honestly, my take is that modern technical project managers are supposed to sit in this space. This is where they're most valuable because they should be the ones that can speak both languages and help translate that. Because, as you said, one of the other issues is business people and software engineers have much different interests. The business people are interested in winning sales and talking to customers, and they do all the front facing stuff. That's their interest. That's why they're in that role. That's what they like to do. Engineers are more interested in the art and science of writing code and figuring out problems and solving puzzles. So the interest, they're not competing interests, but they're just different interests for the same problem, and getting those to look at each other sometimes is difficult. Like you said, it's just I'm looking over here. I don't have time to look at your bit.
Yeah.
Number 5, build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. This is as I was going through these, this one stuck out to me as the most important one now. And what I've seen is the more that I start trusting junior developers and the more responsibility I hand to junior developers and others on the team, the more they'll actually do because they feel trusted and empowered. So, of course, there are exceptions to that rule. There's always somebody that's going to try to take advantage of it and be a jerk. But for the most part, people who have the jobs want the jobs and they like the jobs and they want to be doing this stuff and they want to learn new things about it. So let them do it.
I think this is probably again the rail against that top-down control of the waterfall model.
Hmm.
So it's basically they like the sense of the empowerment, to go ahead and get the job done independently, not have someone lording over them and say, thou must do it this way.
Right. And yeah, Colin, as a junior, I agree. Yep. And honestly, I think that's better for their business because junior programmers are typically much hungrier about learning than senior programmers are. We've already done all this stuff, we've been there and we get a little jaded and grumpy and old and stuff. But letting the new blood and the new energy and stuff like that really I think is better for the business because the junior developers they've got a lot to learn. They want to learn. They're jazzed about it. They're excited about this new thing. They're not burnt yet. And I know what that feels like because I got to a point of burning out and I had to take a break from programming for a couple years. But I think it's good for the business to do stuff like that. But let the people that are hungry chase the food, right? Plus, they're younger and have a lot more energy than the old farts. So, number 6, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Oh, COVID, you just broke the hell out of this one. Oh. See, of all the things COVID caused problems with, this, number 6, that was the one. Broke my heart. The good news is technology kind of kept that from being a real problem. Face-to-face doesn't have to be in the same room. Zoom is kind of face-to-face. Although I will say it is, I do still like to have meetups with people and get in the same room.
Yeah, there's been a lot of communication studies, not relative to programming, but the amount of information that's lost when you go from strictly written word. Well, let's take it from face to face, and then you've got to drop off when you're talking about video conferencing, Zoom, and then you got to drop off when you're talking about just a phone conversation, and then the drop off when you're talking about writing. So face to face is the way to go to minimize miscommunication, and it just goes downhill from there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, face-to-face in the same room, physically face-to-face is the optimal way for some communications. Like for brainstorming sessions on a whiteboard, nothing better than a big old whiteboard in a room with 4 or 5 developers just writing crap all over the whiteboard. I love that. That's the best brainstorming sessions in the world are that way. And while there are kind of virtual whiteboard technologies, it's just not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, not the same.
So, there is a lot to be said for co-location when you're talking about some things, but it's not as bad as it was, in the 90s when if you weren't co-located, you were talking on a phone.
Yeah.
And usually that was a wired phone hanging on a wall in your house. So it's a lot different time. So Zoom is adequate when you can't do anything else. but it's still preferable to be co-located. A lot of benefits to that. The 90s were the best. I mean, okay. I suppose. I mean, I graduated high school in 91, so I was adult enough through most of it to kind of go, well, that was all right. Number 7, working software is the primary measure of progress. Yes, folks, delivery is a feature. Delivery is the feature. If you don't deliver anything, the quality of your code means nothing. So, I mean, you can spend years making your code pretty, but if it's not making money, from a non-academic standpoint, from a business standpoint, if it's not making money, it's worth nothing.
Yep.
So I think this one's fairly self-explanatory. Delivery is a feature. Number 8, agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Okay, I have a couple of minor issues with this. Indefinitely is a big word. Nobody can maintain constant pace indefinitely. I think that was a little too ambitious.
Well, I think I know. I think I know, have a feeling why they wrote it this way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as a whole, the entire process group should be able to maintain, but the way they worded it feels like, hey, each individual person ought to be able to go forever. You know, you got to take a vacation once. But I think what they're getting after is you should have things set up in such a way that if somebody takes a vacation, things don't just stop. Question about number 7. Should that be at the cost of not writing tests in order to ship faster? Pretty sure I know that. Well, you know that answer from me. No. You don't sacrifice test quality to ship faster. Shipping, fast isn't necessarily the best thing. You have to deliver, but you have to deliver quality. Delivering garbage is worthless too. So no, you shouldn't.
Here's your new software package. It crashes 5 times a day, but other than that, it's great.
Right? Yeah. Oh, this will be a hot seller. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, you don't sacrifice tests for that. Tests are part of the development process. I mean, it's part of it. Yeah, it usually works. Works on my machine. God, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Can't tell you how many times I've said that. I don't know what to tell you. Works on my machine. Must be an ID10T problem.
Early on with the Rails, that was a real frustration because everything would work in development and you pushed it to like staging. And it's like, what's wrong with my assets? You know, the whole asset migration or, you know, that whole thing. Ugh.
Oh, anyway, yeah. Early Rails asset pipelines were.
Oh, yeah. I digress.
God.
Now, with regard to number 8 here, what I think they're talking about and what they were, again, a lot of these I see them as railing against the status quo at the time, is thinking about crunch, meaning that, okay, you're working at a regular pace, maybe you're a little slow, but okay, here are the requirements, you write them out or whatever, and then suddenly the clock has run out, there's no more budget, we got to hurry up and get this thing done, and now people are pulling all-nighters and working like crazy. So it's not feast famine is the wrong word, but basically they're doing more than sprinting and then they're falling down tired, like, oh, that was terrible. You know, this is essentially what game development is still today.
Right.
There's, you know, you're cruising along okay, but then stuff hits the fan, you got to finish it up, and then there's massive crunch, working 60, 80-hour a weeks, whatever they do. Then they release the product and then everybody goes, you know, and rest. So I think they're wanting to, that was, I think, still something that could happen in the waterfall development, you know, years ago. and they were basically fighting against that and why they came up with this principle. That's what I see when what I think about when I read this.
Yeah, the AAA game dev companies really, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they advertise their release date and then say, okay, get it done by then. And they're like, wait, what? I mean, that's the whole reason that the worst video game ever developed exists. Whoever played the Atari ET game? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that tends to happen, I think, maybe more so in the entertainment industry because, or I mean, maybe even just general B2C businesses because, there's a lot of business that gets done around the holiday season, end of the year, or if there's something that is more seasonally focused, you got to get it done by that. If there's software related to summer in some fashion, well, you got to get done by a particular time.
To a point, yeah. But one of the big benefits that non-development things, a lot of non-development things have, is that in a lot of cases you can just throw money at it and help that. That doesn't work most of the time with development. If I was in a crunch and my boss said, hey, look, here's 4 new developers for you. You should be able to do it now. Well, no, that's actually going to slow me down because now I have to train them, show them the code base, get them up to speed and stuff. That's actually going to make my problem worse. So,
Read the Mythical Man Month, kids.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I I think what started happening in the 90s is people started realizing that code development is not a normal product development type process. It's much different than a lot of other things um, that do successfully use waterfall model. And there's nothing wrong with waterfall model in and of itself. It was just a bad application of project management for software development. It wasn't the appropriate way to do it. We started to discover. I say we, meaning not me. People way smarter than me discovered that. I wasn't thinking about this at that point. Okay, number 9. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. In other words, keep your technical debt under control. I mean, that's...
And that also will help with 8, maintaining a consistent pace.
Right.
If you keep your technical debt under control.
And what's the best way to keep your technical debt under control? Write
I don't know.
tests. Have a good test suite so that not only do you make sure that you don't regress things, but that you're confident and able to refactor along the way without being worried that, oh my God, if I touch this line of code, the world may end. So you can't do that without tests. Tests actually help reduce your technical debt by quite a bit. So have tests, kids. Number 10, simplicity. Yay! The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. So basically, be a lazy ass programmer. Wait, no, that's not right. What this came to be termed is YAGNI. You ain't gonna need it. Don't program crap you aren't gonna need. It may be the best idea in the world, but if the customer never uses it, it's a waste of time. So what you think it should do is irrelevant. It's what the customer needs it to do. So don't do stuff that's not essential. And one of my bosses in the past his favorite phrase was, you have to keep it Crayola Crown simple. If a 6-year-old can't figure it out, you've made it too complicated. Yeah, Drew, and don't guess what you'll need. We're bad guessers. That's for sure. Yeah, I've done that so many times. Oh, this would be great. Let me program this, and then I take it to product, and they're like, "What the hell would I use this for? This is what? I don't need this." Ah, crap. I just spent a week on that. Number 11, the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. I love this. This is when I do project management, I like to just kind of I like to step into a project management role as I'm just the guy that's in charge of getting blockers out of the way, but the team is in charge of organizing their workflow, right? So when the reason that works best is because when everybody buys into the idea, when an idea contains parts from everybody on the team, they tend to push it forward instead of resisting it. So, don't hand down the dictums from on high. That's just going to get resistance because humans are humans. Say, okay, everybody puts their ideas in. Let's craft the best thing out of all these ideas from what you guys think, and then let's carry that forward. That works way better. All right, yeah, so more to say about that. Number 12, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. This is incredibly important. This is the not post-mortem. That's kind of looking at the end of a project. We call these. We do them every 2 weeks. I'm having a bad brain day. Whatever. Anyway, this is where the teams get together.
It's a retrospective.
Retrospective. Thank you.
Okay.
Holy crap. Yes. And these are usually, you should have these on a regular basis. It's not usually like at the end of a sprint. We do it at the end of every other sprint because we'd have like a 1-hour retrospective because we get all the different teams together into this retrospective. It's not per team. And doing that every sprint would just be too much. But, we talk about, okay, what went well? Everybody lists out what went well. What can we do better? What were the problems we had? And then we pick, we all vote on those. And the top 3, here are the problems we need to work on, are what we work on for the next 2 weeks. And then we do that process again. And since we started doing that, we have made massive improvements in attitudes, in morale, in processes, in the amount of work we're able to put out, in the amount of knowledge that's exchanged. Those things are incredibly important. So if you're not doing retrospectives, you really ought to think about them. They're not hard to do. They don't typically take very long. Ours take an hour because we've usually got 30 people on them. But most times you're doing retrospectives, it's on a team, so you get somewhere between 5 and 10 people. You can do them in half an hour. And there are programs out there that do this online for you. We use a program called Retro, REETRO, that facilitates that. But yeah, those things have made a huge impact on our productivity, our morale. It's just been really, really good. So if you're not doing that in your team, I would highly encourage you to bring that up. Project manager. Hi, English. I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. Project manager. If you are the project manager, start doing it. Really easy. Your programmers will thank you. I promise. So, so those are the 12 principles that they use to craft the Agile Manifesto. And the Agile Manifesto is actually this. And you can find all this stuff at agilemanifesto.org. But basically, there's individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So when you have both of those, prefer the one on the left. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Oh God, yes. Do your documentation after the fact, not before. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Yes. The more fluid your customer can be, the easier this gets. Responding to change over following a plan. So, and what they say is while there's value in the stuff on the right, there's more value in the stuff on the left. So they're not saying don't use processes, and they're saying don't use them at the expense of individuals and interactions. Go the other way. So that's the Agile. Hi, coffee. That's the Agile Manifesto, and the 12 principles that brought it to life. And I would encourage people to kind of maybe print those out and hang them in front of their computer so you can look at them from time to time. It's really good to get your head into that space because it's not a space that software engineers typically think in. They're thinking about problem solving and puzzle manipulation and coding. They're not thinking about how does this fit into the group and the business, and how do I relate to the customer, because a lot of times software engineers don't relate to the customers. They don't have any interaction with them, so they kind of get put in their white tower and isolated from the customers. So having this in front of you to think about it on a regular basis kind of helps you focus your efforts to what is going to be best for the business and what's going to be best for the team. All right. So, any final thoughts on that from you?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you for coming and chatting with us. If you did enjoy that, please mash that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe so that you know when we go live. Also, seeing subscriptions come into my inbox makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. If you want to help the channel, the best thing you can do is tell all your beautiful friends about it, because you're beautiful people, and I know you have lots of beautiful friends. So make sure to invite them on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Next time, we will be doing another surprise show because we haven't figured it out yet. But if you want to know what it is ahead of time, you can follow us on @DuckyDevShow on Twitter, and I'll let you know as soon as we figure it out. We will probably be having some more guests that I've put out a kind of a call for recommendations of people you'd like to see on the show. So, if you know people, just throw them our way, give us some contact info, and we will reach out to them and try to get them on the show. We've got a few people that are starting to line up, so we'll see how that works out. But anyway, it's a lot of fun. I love this topic. Fun stuff. And we will see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, happy programming.
Happy programming.